Hi everyone. All right, the music suddenly stopped. We had several technical difficulties today, but let's get started. I see Samia coming on now. Whoa, speaking of music, something is crazy going on outside my apartment. Let me move a little bit. Today's just one of those crazy days, but none of this matters because we have a really cool guest today. Let me give a little bit of backstory before we get started. So, um, This DAO Talks talk is obviously for the DAO community to learn about DAOs, to speak about DAOs, debate DAOs, and we reach out to various speakers, to various people that we know are doing cool things in the DAO world, and have interesting conversations with them. And what we hope this to be, what I personally hope this to be eventually, is the community itself doing most of the talking and just pulling people up from the community who are very knowledgeable, who are very passionate about DAOs, to talk about their perspectives on DAOs and to debate the big questions in DAOs today, because there's quite a few of them. And together, I think we're going to learn better and help DAOs grow better. And this is what happened last week with Phygital, who's going to introduce himself in a minute, um, raising a very interesting question that at the very end of the conversation last week made the conversation even stronger and more nuanced. And we'll talk about that today. And I love that personally. I think that's exactly the way it should be. Yesterday's listeners become today's speakers. Yesterday's newbies, I'm talking about myself in this case, become tomorrow's builders. And to me, this is exactly why DeFi works, why crypto works, why DAOs work, or at least why they could work, I think, in a very big way. And so to me, this is a very special episode. But anyway, enough from me. Let's hear from Phygital.
Oh, so you have no idea who I am, huh?
I honestly have no idea who you are, and I know this probably makes me even more embarrassed in the second than I am now. But yes, please introduce yourself. I seriously have no idea.
No, I love that. Good question. I guess I'll start by laying foundation. That's probably important. My question didn't come out of the blue. I usually host really, really large spaces or engage in pretty high level conversation about kind of blockchain, digital efficacy, politics, finance, but I have a particular personal penchant for DAOs. I've been in blockchain for about a decade. Uh, I guess what you call crypto or whatever. I'm an attorney by trade. I represented some of the founders of Tether, Mastercoin, OmniWallet, OmniChain. For those who don't know, those were the first smart contracts that were built on the blockchain network. And Actually, I guess I'll send you after this space. I'll send you me and my team. Me for the last couple of years, my team for about 7 years have been working on DAOs and DAO infrastructure and effective implementation. Things like Dunbar numbers in terms of efficient deployment of DAOs, um, uh, reputational networks, social efficiencies, AI, and stuff like that. So I popped in your room because it said DAO. Um, And I've recently been getting into a little bit of Chia stuff with Klaus, who's in the audience right now. But uh, I love blockchain. I love uh, self sovereignty. I love decentralization, and I think DAOs are a beautiful opportunity, but probably the worst developed tooling in Web three. I do not believe there is one DAO that is effective, and I'm actually in the process of putting DAOs on chain and using AI to make them organically efficient. And my question at the end of the last space, which essentially was, when creating a DAO, is anybody actually thinking about who they're putting in the DAO before you even get into quadratic equations and atrophy and other voting mechanisms? The, in my opinion, the best way to start off with the highest likelihood of success is usually you spend a lot of money marketing to find your audience. Wouldn't you want to find your audience first if you have the ability to finance the business second, if that makes sense? So that's me. Hi. Thanks for hosting, Dex.
All right, so a lot of things to ask here. I'm not gonna ask you about Tether and their legal the ground to stand on because different show, different saga. Been there, done that. We don't have nearly enough time to explore that one. But for DAOs, I mean, I'm not even more impressed with you than I was a week ago by far. Uh, and well, let's put all the legal stuff aside. Let's focus on DAO. So that let's get to that question. Let's explore it a little bit. I like the idea. I like the question that you raise of when you're forming a DAO, shouldn't you find your audience first, right? So let's break that down. If you were forming a DAO right now, this minute, for wherever, let's say, some particular interest that you have, whether it's a hobby or a mission or a community, whatever it was, and I know that influences by itself what kind of audience you would find, of course, right? But pick whatever you want. Let's say it's a community focused on a common interest. Let's say it's a sports club or something, right? Let's say it's a European football club. And what would you start with? Who would you look for? Would you look for the most passionate fans? Would you look at people who can administer it? Would you look at, FIFA 2023 top managers? And I mean FIFA the game, or maybe even FIFA the actual organization. Would you look for legal experts, finance experts, DAO experts, etc. Let's explore that a little bit. Let's play with a little bit of if you were building your DAO all-star team, just keep rolling with the sports metaphor. Who would you invite there first? Who would you the transfer window opens or whatever? Who would you target right away and why?
So, do I call you DeXe?
Oh yeah, I forgot to introduce myself this time because of the technical mess in the beginning. My name's David, spelled same as David. I'm part of the DeXe team. Yeah, you can call me David, or if you have to, David or DeXe, whatever you want, really. But David is the right one.
Where are you from, David?
I was originally born in Ukraine, grew up in US, now travel in the world, multiple citizenship, citizen of the world, really. What about you?
Got it. I'm U.S. born. My family's South African. I live in L.A. and New York,
Nice.
and I'll
Lived
send
for over a
you.
decade in
I'll
New
send.
York. We
I'm
might be
sorry.
neighbors. Lived in for like 12 years in New York. My brother still lives there, so New York's
And,
near dear to me.
and by New York, we mean Manhattan, right?
No, well, I mean Manhattan as well. Inwood, Washington Heights, Bay Ridge,
Uh,
Bensonhurst, Hell's Village for a little bit. That's another story for another day. Never ever do that. Never.
Hell's Kitchen, you mean?
Yeah, Hell's Kitchen. Never do that. It's in the
It's nice
middle.
now.
It's horrible. It's between Lincoln Tunnel and Times Square. You don't want to be trapped between those two places. Other than that, it's great.
I, I think that's actually the last part of Hell's Kitchen that hasn't been developed. And what is DeXe Network or DeXe DAO?
Oh yeah, so just really quick to not take it away from you. So DeXe DAO is bringing the platform, and we're going to talk about a lot more in a couple of months to build DAOs and to govern DAOs, right? Which is why we care about DAOs. Basically, all-in-one platform to build and govern DAOs in a way that's simple, that's effective, that aligns incentives correctly, etc. I don't want to open all the cards yet because I'm gonna hear it from our marketing team because they have a whole plan for that, but it's a lot of very exciting stuff, and it should be, from what I've seen, very simple and very effective and very flexible and all the good things. And
We
we
should
came,
we should probably talk offline about
yeah,
that.
yeah, of course we connect offline on that, and our community already knows this, obviously. But I'm trying to be ethically um, less promoting Indexia and more talking about DAOs because that's the purpose of the DAO talk and. The idea
All right,
is,
let's get into it. Let's get
yeah,
into it.
but I'm happy to talk about DeXe as well. Of course, I love it. I love DeXe, but I will probably lose a few audience members who actually want to learn about the DAOs and not just DeXe product. you know,
There are very few people who actually want to learn about DAOs, which is why they're
the
absolutely terrible.
whole idea of this is to try to change that. And I know I'm just one person with just one, DAO, but that's how it starts, right?
Well, welcome Stranger, welcome Klaus, welcome Erich. Nice to see you guys.
Yeah,
We're gonna
let's
talk
try
about
to do it.
DAOs.
Yeah, let's do
Okay,
it.
okay. First and foremost, do you mind if we do this like a question back and forth kind of thing? Because
Oh yeah, go for it.
perfect.
This is
Why do
our time. We'll do whatever you feel like. It's that.
why do you think DAOs were created?
So personally, I think DAOs are created because the old forms of organizing suck. That's the short
Okay,
version.
I think DAOs were created because it's a pretty decent way to make launching tokens legal. Silence. Okay. Well, the core of the Howey test is uh, are you um, are you investing in the likelihood of success of are you investing in an agreement or a contract or an investment contract for profit, and is that likelihood of success for profit based on the efforts of others, and the others is interestingly centered around the idea of centralized or decentralized. And in arguments about whether Ethereum is legal or other tokens are legal, often what comes into the conversation is the term sufficiently decentralized. The reason they use the word sufficiently decentralized is, are you relying on the likelihood of profits from the efforts of others or yourself, essentially? And what a DAO proposes is that you're not relying on a C suite of CMO, CSO, CEO, CTO, COO, CFO, and such, but that everybody makes every decision, and that's where the egalitarian voting structure comes from at its core, right? Uh, and that's where DAOs ultimately fail currently. The idea being, right, if everybody has an equal vote, i.e., one token, one vote, then the outcome, right? Nobody inherently, that's why we get so upset about the elections when we fear interference. What we're saying is it's not sufficiently decentralized, and that there are core individuals actually guiding the outcome of an election. And a true DAO is supposed to be fully decentralized in terms of everybody making the decision. And then the argument is that's legal, right? That's why a lot of companies flip into DAOs. But the problem is they're not properly done, right? So, for example, the initial distribution of tokens, right? Early DAOs would have like 20, 30% that went to, look at Olympus DAO, look at Klima, Ohm, Time. They went to the founders. Well, then it's not a real DAO if you've basically decided what the rules are for the DAO and kept control because you have the largest voting block. So my answer to your question, sorry to ramble, is I wouldn't I wouldn't pick specific people necessarily from FIFA. And the way a DAO has to work properly is that I believe they will mimic corporate structures. So you still have a COO, a CEO, a CTO, a CMO, a CSO, a CFO, but the DAO at every level stacked upwards. So DAOs need to be vertical, not horizontal. Vote in people who are the most qualified, the most trusted, the most experienced, and have the most reputational value that they've accrued from the DAO and every other DAO in making effective decision making. And every position in the DAO can be fluid or needs to be fluid so that they can be interchanged at any given time. So, yes, you're the CEO because the CEO is not the king. The CEO is the CEO at the given time that executes those positions or responsibilities. So, DAOs need to be node oriented and task oriented. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, partly, right? So, I mean, I see the perspective that it's a legal way of selling tokens because, we had the ICO before, now we have the DAOs, and of course, if, a huge portion of it goes to the team, and then if the team has low enough of a quorum set up that their votes alone can decide everything, then yeah, it's not at all decentralized. It's very nice looking shell of a DAO, right? But we all know what's actually happening. But well, a couple of questions. First of all, something that's just personally always been bothering me that I never really saw a full answer to myself is how are DAOs, at least in the current form, different from just the shareholders of whatever public company you want to name, right? Technically speaking, shareholders holders can appoint directors, vote for directors, decide, and all of that. What makes DAOs so different, and what should we focus on to really make them different from just regular public companies or private companies for that matter? But obviously, public one is a better comparison. And then specifically about uh, who should be part of it and why should be and how it should be fluent, how it should be competent. So you mentioned that they should be competent and flexible, and there should be node focused. But let's go deeper in that, right? Let's What kind of nodes? Is it just area based, as in legal, marketing, tech, whatever? Is it working groups? Is it some entirely new structure that we haven't even really talked about much and should? How do you even know that? Okay, I'm gonna leave the expert question for later because that's a really big one. But that's the one eventually that I want to get to, right? Like, how do you determine which people go there and which people stay, and not just, obviously answer is you look at their on-chain voting record. Yes, sure you do. Beyond that, let's actually debate this a bit. Let's discuss this a bit.
So I think the last thing you should just ended with is like, um, how do you prepare for the LSATs? Well, you read Hop on Pop first, right? You start with Hop on Pop. Um, so
So when I
voting
did my
history.
GMAT
Go ahead.
prep, I went on like I decided to go to business school in a couple of months before I had the GMATs, and I just went on some random forum that I found on Web2, and people were dumping questions there, and I just read them and answered them, read them and answered them, and we dissected them together, and I aced the GMATs just like that. So that sounds very familiar.
I guess the point is, voting history is probably the most pedantic uh, metric to determine who should be in a position of skill set, right? Not to diminish your GMAT scores. Um, by the way, after this, send me your email. I'll send you. We actually developed a 46-page DAO constitution. There's a 4-page one as well that's like cliff notes that
We'll definitely do.
it's actually, so I've given it to the ApeCoin DAO and some of the stuff they're implementing. I don't need to take credit for it. My team doesn't need to take credit for it. We just want effective DAOs. Is starting to eat at what we've hypothesized, and we didn't just hypothesize. My team lived this. So a bunch of them went out to Colorado, lived together, and tried to figure out how to build companies together while living together and working together, and what worked, what didn't work, and then deployed that to global companies to try to reorganize how they um, how they adopted or adapted in this new remote work world and still remaining efficient. So we believe that DAOs are necessary for a remote work future where you don't have the control element of being in an office, and that like biblical hierarchy where you have the boss in this office and you have human resources in this office, and there's those check in check out stuff. How do you work efficiently in a decentralized world and remote working? And I think DAOs, whether they're a DAO in particular or the the mechanics of a DAO, are necessary for the future of work as we know it. So your question was governance.
Yeah. And
Okay.
how are we going to divide it, or not? We're going to divide it. Like, what are some good ways to divide it? What's a good way to really let the experts shine, let expertise shine, and really make it effective for the DAO in a decentralized way, but still an effective one, right? The one that actually gets shit done.
So we believe it's so first and foremost, this is my personal belief. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Corporations work, right? They just don't work as good as they could. So we look at the corporate structures as the top-down approach, and then we look at what happens in a corporation is, as you dribble down from the top, again, the C-suite, uh, down all the way to the people who actually hire, you have by definition decreasing level of skill sets and ability to discern uh, quality or correctness. My brain's not working. It's 9:30 in the morning here in LA. I just had my coffee. But so what happens is you have the worst people, nothing personal, in a company doing the most important thing, which is hiring, right? So from that's why I asked the question about sorting and organizing people from the bottom up. So we believe it's important to sort efficiently from the bottom up while you build controls or structures top down. So you mentioned the quorum issue, right? So day one, uh, we don't set. our opinion is you don't set quorums. You let the DAO set the quorums, right? Because the corporate, and let's just call it corporate. DAOs are corporations. Corporate governance should be decided in a DAO structure by the constituents, and so you let them set those quorum, majorities, minorities, uh, everything you see that you just take for granted when you get your corporate documents for a C corp, an S corp, or any other filing entity, reporting entity. Uh, you just take it for granted, right? There's super majority for this decision, and the manager gets to spend this amount, and the meetings take place once every quarter, every 3 months. We believe that there should be like guidance, like this is what other people do, but make your own decisions. Um, and we also believe, and this is the question that I asked, um, how do you sort people to begin with to make your if you start with a faulty foundation, you're never going to build the the pillars of a functional entity, and you're bound to fail. That's what ApeCoin DAO, that has $1.5 billion under management, is doing. Or you'll end up with an overly hyper focused DAO that doesn't do much usually besides for deploy money, like Nouns DAO. Right? Those work real simple. We deploy money. You decide which project, and we give money. But we believe, and I believe that things like that mirror Meyer-Briggs testing. So doing gamification. So it could even be like a Dookie Dash game that is secretly testing your skill sets, your aptitudes, your preferences, your predilections, your weak points, your strong points, and then use those to funnel people into the correct categories. And then when spinning up what I call nodes, which are really just tasks, right? Every that task should, by definition, understandably have the required or necessary components, like a recipe, to accomplish the task at hand. So you should know if it's, for example, I'm helping spin up a DAO for political political outcomes. So we know what our outcomes, our goals are. Our goals are, and you might find this interesting, and I'll stop rambling or just cut me the fuck off because I will talk forever. Um, our goals are, uh, what are the problems with crypto adoption, right? So I just had a space the other day, which you should join, by the way. I'll have it tomorrow morning as well. We had an average of 6,000 people at a time, and we were talking about the XRP results, right? And what that meant for crypto, and what that meant for blockchain, what that meant for decentralization, and what that meant for DAOs. The core question that we want to know is, okay, we finally got some litigation, which should lead to legislation. Why did Library fail? Well, Library failed for lack of financing and lack of a quality legal team. Nothing personal, Library. I love you, James Deaton. Y'all fucked up. Um, so a political DAO aimed at stopping CBDCs and promoting uh, good crypto regulation. What's the first thing you need? Well, you need case precedents. You need education to the existing governmental bodies and governmental institutions and players, and you need to place people into government that are going to who understand what you're doing, and like any initiative, are favorable to your positions. So the DAO is being built around that. Now, who is good for that? Well, you need lawyers, you need lobbyists, you need political activists, you need people who like donate, so money. So I think each DAO, and I think the biggest part of why DAOs fail is most DAOs don't have a purpose. ApeCoin DAO can't tell you what its purpose is. And without a purpose, how do you do anything?
So many things to speak to here. First of all, my first degree was political science from Columbia, and I did not pursue that because politics sucks. And that's the short version of it. But from my experience and my education, I could tell you the first thing a political DAO needs is capital, right? Both monetary and political and popular and otherwise. But the one thing that I really want to not let go, because if I heard you right, just to clarify, did I hear you right that you said that people should be experts, leaders, etc., and that should be funneled into positions based on an algorithm of some sort that calculates what they're good at, rather than on
Yes,
democratic.
past, present, future. So not a singular analysis point, not just a binary analysis point. I'm sure it sounds like you got a business degree. The more data points you have to make any decision, the better, the higher the likelihood, the higher the likelihood, the better the outcome of the decision. Correct?
Yeah, it's no, mathematically it makes sense, but philosophically, I mean, this first of all is very much Pluto's Republic kind of thing of people should be doing what they're best at, whether they like it or not. Which, yes, makes sense, but damn, that's not very humanistic, right? I mean,
Well,
realistic.
it actually goes back to a very interesting point. What up, Jet? Nice to see you. It's been a minute. Um, it actually goes back to a very interesting kind of. I wish there was more people. I forgot the space was today. I would have promoted it more. Next time, I'll get a bunch more people in here,
Bring it.
just so I don't,
Let's.
just so we don't have to have these conversations over and over again.
Yeah,
Uh, you know what I mean?
yeah.
Um, and I'll invite you. You know what? I'll set a space for DAO Talk. Um, so I used to host Mario spaces on crypto. Now I
Hmm.
host with Whalecoin Talk. So we get a sizable audience. I'll do one on DAOs, and I'll invite you and DeXe DAO to come on.
Me
And
too. Absolutely.
cool. Um, because nothing personal. I only joined crypto Twitter about a year and a half ago to educate and create product market fit. But for some reason, y'all motherfuckers don't want to listen. Apologies for the language, but like I've been yelling IP
Yeah,
for a year and a
yeah.
half. I've been yelling DAOs. I've been yelling Phygital goods, and now all of a sudden Luca does it, and we're like, wow, what a great idea. Um,
Welcome to
uh,
the Twitter. This is the F Twitter, by the way, in case you didn't
Thanks, brother. Um, okay, so uh, I get often asked. In the real world, I technically have a law degree, but I do real estate. I've owned a bunch of bars and restaurants. I do IoT. I do tech. I built blockchain solutions in the real world that never launched tokens that were, net revenue positive. $4 or $5 million a year off of actual tech. And I get asked all the time, like people come be like, I had the other day a partner. He's like, he's got an incredible dev team there. And he literally goes to me, he goes, hey, we're trying to build a SaaS company. And I was like, cool. What are you building? And he goes, we don't know, but we want to build SaaS. And I said, much like I've told most people who ask me for mentorship, I say, that's a great idea. What are you good at right now? What are you really good at right now? Usually it's what you've done for a living for quite a while or a hobby you've had for a while. Hopefully it's both. And I say, do that. Build a business off that. They'll say, well, I don't like it. I'm like, no problem. You're good at it, which means you have the highest likelihood of success at that. Once you do that, right, and you'll fall on your face less, it'll hurt less because you will always fall on your face. Uh, Learning the pieces of business that you haven't learned yet, like you might be a great waiter, bartender, server, AGM, general manager, manager, barback, but you may not have worked the back office, so you don't know how accounting goes, you don't know how tax preparation goes, you don't know inventory, so on and so forth. Once you learn all the pieces you don't know, but you have a head start, you'll be successful there. Then go do what you love. So yes, DeXe, it doesn't sound humanistic, but idealism doesn't usually fucking work. And we're learning that right now, right? 5, 6 years ago, I remember sitting in the founders of Ethereum's offices. I was like, cool, DApps are great. What, what's working on DApps? Do you know what the answer was?
autocratic kind of thing. Like when one.
Porn and gambling.
Oh, porn and gambling. Are you talking about? Great. I
DApps.
should definitely do more research, but that's good to know.
Those were the only DApps that were actually functioning, right? They had like lists and lists on the chalkboard of all these kinds of things that were being built, right? And this led to the ICO craze, right? Here's what we think we can do. Give me money so I can try and do it. The reality is what worked were the things that people actually wanted crypto for. Am I allowed to be a little Uh,
You could be as
okay,
not PC as you want to be. This is the internet, this Web3, no censorship that I know of.
perfect. Uh, all men have penises. Most want to jerk off. Most people on the internet don't have girlfriends. They like to jerk off. Let's figure out a way for them to do it anonymously. Most people on the internet are degens. They like money. Let's give them gambling. Anything above that doesn't seem to work, right? Or it takes a long time. It's like the whole NFT utility thing. Like it's a
Honestly, I
great
see it
idea.
as a good thing because porn and gambling are the industries that bring tech forward, before anyone else can, right? They're the groundbreakers, the trailblazers, whatever you want to call them, and they're fun.
And they're fun. They're innate, right? So they're things that I don't need to convince you of. You want money because you like things, and I won't do the first one again. I think we've settled
Yeah,
that.
there are obvious use cases. That for sure obvious use cases where it makes a lot of sense to bring in quick anonymous payment methods.
Correct. So going back to the humanistic part of DAOs, I know it doesn't sound great, but to make an allegory, to make a correlation, and my girlfriend just walked in the room, so I should probably stop this part of. I'll twist what I was going to say. Um, Most likely, those forms of DAOs will work, right? So, uh, baby, I'm sorry, I'm talking about that men like to jerk off and gamble. And sorry, okay. Um, my point being, we're not going to get effective DAOs until we get functional DAOs, and then we can get to idealistic DAOs. So yeah, you're going to do shit you don't like, but guess what? Right now, most of you sit in a fucking cubicle under bright white lights or drive Ubers around, and you don't like that either. And most Uber drivers complain about the fact that they don't get paid enough. And my response is, you get to drive around all day, stop whenever you want, eat whenever you want, go wherever you want. We tend to forget what's good. So DAOs will never work until we understand that they're not going to be fun to begin with, and they're going to be uncomfortable.
Since you paused there, I can expect you to keep going, but um, what I'm curious, there's many things, and I should preface this by saying that I'm gonna challenge you on stuff just to mess with you and to make the discussion more interesting. It doesn't mean I actually disagree. Actually, mostly I agree, but I
Well,
love
you
to.
already started. You just said it's not interesting, but okay.
No, no, no. I said that I agree with you, but I'm gonna fight with you just because it makes it even more exciting and brings out better discussions, right? Because I did debate club. I was basically pre-law, but and worked with attorneys for 5 years, so it's fun. But
I'm sorry.
uh, yeah, yeah, I was too, but I was going to night school. It's fine. I helped immigrants. It was good. But fuck. Okay, so one of the many things that I want to pick on just for fun. So the idea of first learn what's needed, first learn the basics, right, of different things, different roles you need to take on, or maybe one specific role, and then do what's fun. I get that. That's interesting. It's definitely the startup way from everything I've seen. Um, I'm I see it clash a little bit with what I'm seeing from like my brother and a lot of my friends are in various tech startups and bigger companies, all the way up to Google, etc. And what I see a lot, especially in the smaller ones, is as soon as, especially in tech, as soon as a tech lead gets offered the CTO role, the first thing he does is say, "Hell no, I'll take less money. I'll stay lead engineer, lead whatever." Right? I don't want to manage people. I don't want to run this thing. I hate it. I'm not good at it. I just want to code. Right? So wouldn't it be better to maybe raise those HR people that you mentioned that are not really well qualified, or to help people kind of go on the path of management, leadership, wherever it is, rather than get people who, want to code, try to get them to do other things that they don't really want to do in the first place? It doesn't kind of like
You
make their
answered
life.
your own question.
I
Then by
did.
def then by definition, those coders aren't the most apt and appropriate for the positions that you think they are. That's really the point. One of the points of effective and efficient human organization is not hiring people that you think are good for the job, but the wisdom of the crowd deciding who actually is good for that job, right? And that's where real DAOs won't become really effective until we have immutable reputational profiles, right?
So you're saying
Until every
let people
go-
do the things they love to do if you don't see potential, if the data points don't see the potential and bless you to do something else in the organization. But if the algos show that they do have that potential, focus on that.
well, it's not the algos, right? It's the algos and the people, and that's the point of a DAO, right? So if you have, so we typically see DAOs of what, 10, 20, 30,000 people. We will eventually see DAOs, right? Because DAOs are a natural manifestation of the original origins and goals of decentralization, right? Self-sovereignty, right? DAOs are the seedling model for what will be self-governed nations and true self-sovereignty. There is self-sovereignty inherently requires self-governance, and that's what our biggest problem in crypto right now is that we want freedom, but we don't impose governance. DAOs are the inverse, in my opinion, and just like okay, where does a virus come from?
A virus from something outside that just floats on something or whatever travels on something enters your
Where
bodies.
did, where did, where did it come from? Where did it come from?
My knowledge of biology is admittedly horrible. I'm assuming it's a mutation of something that was not a virus before. I don't know. Something, but
First of all, welcome, Grant, welcome, Kronos. The answer, by the way, is that there is no answer,
oh,
and
thanks
it,
for
it
that.
goes, yes, it goes to the core of dark matter, and the idea of evil, right? That we assume or feel that everything has an equal and opposite reaction. That's the only viable explanation for a virus. There's no explanation of where or why or when a virus came. Period. And it's fascinating. But it has to be the inherent, whether it's God or math or the simulation, whatever you ascribe to, it is the balancing factor, right? I believe that DAOs are the balancing factor to self sovereignty, um, and we're battling it right now, right? We need regulation because we're fuck all at self governance, right? We create FTXs and create scams. So the beauty of DAOs is it's not just an algorithm. An algorithm is just a tool. But the idea is that we all decide who is best for which job and what the DAO should be doing and what governance should look like. So the hope would be that Mitch in the back office who hires people for roles is no longer Mitch. We're all Mitch. And we probably have a higher likelihood of getting it right when it comes to placing people in positions and making decisions for an organization than a stratified corporation exists as it stands now.
So, you know, you mentioned that DAOs are 28 members or something, but with deep DAO stats, I think like 2.2% or some 2.3% have more number of members, right? And granted that most of the DAOs are bullshit DAOs. So, like, how do you get enough members
Your phone's
to
breaking up.
really?
Yeah,
Break? That's weird.
still
I
breaking up.
have perfect. I'm just walking around different rooms and see what's going on today. Why is it different? It's better.
A little bit. Do you always do this AMA style?
Yeah, I always do it in my style. Usually it's a little bit more sitting back and letting the speaker speak, but we haven't fun, so
Oh, okay.
I'm happy to speak. But yeah, there's also obviously questions for the audience. By the way, if anyone from the audience wants to raise a hand or put something in the comments, I'm sure we're happy to discuss that as well. This is obviously a DAO way of doing things.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd love Grant's thoughts on this. Grant, I don't know what you're doing. If you want to come up and chat,
Yeah,
or anybody else.
and I'll give you a speaker role.
Yeah, I hear myself talk too much anyhow, and I'm sure you guys do as well. Um,
Oh wait,
so
there's
what
a
was your
request.
question?
Okay. I forgot because I saw Grant raising his hand. So let's see. if he's on, and give him a. Okay, he does have the speaker role now, so should be able to ask. There you go. Hey, Grant.
Hey, what's up, guys?
By the way, I think I gave Chia the most exposure it's ever had in a Bitcoin space yesterday.
Yeah? How'd that go?
Exactly how my conversations with you went. The first one was, "Oh shit, Chia's still around," and the second one was nobody talks about Chia, but then we talked about Chia for a long time.
That's great.
I want to grant up DeXe, by the way, because I presume and I know that we've had some DAO talks, but I'm sure there's a lot of DAO thought processes in kind of your community. What are your thoughts on what we've been talking about so far with regards to DAOs?
I like the idea of DAOs like as an abstract concept. You know, I've worked on this quite a bit in different chains as well. So like I've worked with DAOs pretty extensively in CosmWasm, and I've started to see some of the rumblings of what can be done with respect to DAOs in Chia. I think some of the things that have plagued DAOs to date, in my mind, have been just a vast disproportionate allocation of voting tokens to people. And so it ends up being that anything that gets proposed to the DAO, there's one person or one group that has such a disproportionate number of the voting tokens that they pretty much decide everything. And then you have really low engagement on any proposals that go in front of the DAO, that it's really hard to have any kind of meaningful discussion about it. So it almost feels like everything's happening in closed doors behind the scenes in smoke-filled cigar rooms rather than with a lot of transparency that I think DAOs were trying to bring to the mix. So it seems like there's a lot of
Grant, so that means that there's just, it seems, too high of a threshold for either a quorum or the majority, quote unquote, majority or approval process, correct? So if you lowered that threshold to like 10%, then that would pass through the first round, and then it would get to the second round. And if the second round isn't governed by the same one token, one vote, then that would have a profound impact on the likelihood of projects getting passed, right?
I mean, I think it comes down to like fundamental like ways that humans govern themselves, right? I think this is why there were delegated responsibilities in like Republican forms of government. And I don't mean like in our American Democrat versus Republican, but rather like when you delegate your vote to somebody who's knowledgeable enough to like take action on your behalf. I think in a lot of DAOs, like people just don't understand what they're voting on. Like we've seen DAOs where people vote on like the weirdest, worst things where they just allow the treasury to get completely drained to like one random wallet address. Like that stuff happens all the time because people just don't fundamentally understand what they're voting on. Or somebody comes in and is able to flash loan themselves a bunch of governance tokens or flash loan a purchase of a governance token, and then they vote the DAO like that. So there's trouble in all of this stuff with respect to just having knowledgeable people actually engaging on the questions being proposed. That's like a huge problem just to solve at all.
So Grant, correct, and that's why I believe. I just laughed. I just posted a tweet that said, "Imagine if Twitter was on chain," and my friend posted a response that just showed Dr. Phil losing his mind. You are seeing DAOs spin. So I believe that DAOs happen in reverse. So you don't intend to create a DAO. A DAO arises, and I believe, and quote me on this, by the way. I'll put some money on this shit. You will see most NFT projects that succeed turn into DAOs. And I may or may not be having a large play in that outcome. But it's going to take a lot of energy and brain power to convince me that a 23-year-old kid who went through Y Combinator for a year is somehow equipped or is going to learn fast enough the skills that a 50 or 60-year-old CEO has to properly run a company.
Yes.
But I will say that said community has CEOs, CTOs, COOs, CMOs, CFOs in their ranks, right? Parading around as cartoons. So at some point, there will be, in my opinion, a general acceptance of the fact that most founders or whatever, big air quotations in the NFT space are not qualified to be running companies. And the protections that were afforded or intended to protect non-institutional investors, retail, i.e. the 1933 Securities Act and securities law in general, were meant that you can't sell equity in a company that you're not properly positioned to run. But instead of just derugging a project, why not empower your community to help you or to run the project to begin with? That's my belief. I'd love your thoughts, Dex.
So that's interesting. I've seen some of those Y Combinator kits, and yeah, I get what you're saying. And obviously, the more people get into blockchain in general, and DAO specifically, you're right, there are going to be more CEOs, and there probably are already with Monkey Picks, etc. And that kind of makes me wonder. So you mentioned NFTs, and I wanted to talk about that a bit as well. What role do you see for NFTs in DAO governance, and what, I guess, since you mentioned that the NFT projects that survive and thrive are going to be DAOs, what does it actually mean, right? Like, Ape DAO is a DAO, but what is it really, and what are the future, so to speak, NFT DAOs are like? For me, I could see, NFTs being governance tokens, right? Given specific voting powers to specific people. But let's get into the details of that. Let's debate that a bit.
So first of all, ApeCoin, there's no apes in here. Good. This is recorded, just delete it afterwards. ApeCoin DAO is a honeypot, right? Essentially, it's the biggest honeypot that's ever been created.
So
you're familiar?
I love apes. I love CryptoPunks. Love them all. But the moment I saw a dude with a specific board ape tattoo on his ankle in Kopangan or Chiang Mai or Pai, whatever, I think it was Pai. Yeah, it was definitely Pai in Thailand. I think I saw everything I ever needed to see. God bless them, but
Listen, what's funny is if you look at ApeCoin DAO, what you see is, like, at the quickest speed I've ever seen, you see corporate inefficiency coming into play. You give too high of a salary, right? $23,000 a month, and all of a sudden, guess what? Nobody wants to be Indiana Jones anymore. Nobody wants to risk their position by pushing innovative developments, because if it doesn't work, you're not going to win the next vote, right? So what's your real incentive as a working group member or any member that's getting compensated irrespective of your results or irrespective of contribution? You're going to get a really inefficient DAO. It's like, imagine a company trying to build itself up and starting by saying, okay, let's go to a mud pit and fight for the CEO position. You're probably going to get most people injured and not the right CEO anyhow. So I believe that the first and most important way to ever create a DAO is to make the foundation strong. And I believe you do that by organizing people effectively. And you do that by either tests, but what you said about NFTs and voting, I believe after the first layer, which can be one token, one vote, and then you implement voting procedures that make it work, right? So if you need 50% and to get an initiative passed and that's not working, then you vote to address the majority requirement and what that number should be. And if the same people that made that not work in the first place affect that outcome, then you figure out ways to, so now it's one wallet, one vote. Or you use AI to scrape the wallets to see correlative actions, and you make it one person, one vote, if you can. But after the first layer, in my opinion, everybody should be voting in who the second layer is. At that point, it's no longer the tokens, the governance tokens, don't impact the decision-making process. You voted in who you think is the most qualified to be doing the positions. So, for example, you have 10,000 people. They vote in 5,000 people divided into 10 different job cycles. So you have CTO, COO, CMO, CEO, CSO, CFO, 10 of those C-suite funnels. And you would then be voting in basically 500, right? 5,010, yeah, 500 of the most qualified, most trusted, most experienced, most active people for that role. The 5,000 vote in, or the 500 vote in 250. The 250 vote in 125. The 125 vote in 50. The 50 vote in 10. The 10 vote in 1. And that goes for each silo of qualified positions. Oh, who is that, baby?
The guy from the Malibu.
Oh, amazing. Sorry. My girlfriend got a write-up in the LA Times, and she's excited.
Congrats, mazel tov to her.
Congrats, baby, mazel tov. Yeah. My new Jewish friend says.
Yeah.
What did you say, baby?
All right, awesome. We're getting cross-cultural here and cross-geographic and cross-industry. Okay. Wait. So there's so much I want to ask, but there's a request from Florian, so I want to give him the floor, and then I'll defer my questions until later, because DAO. Florian, you're on, and you should be able to speak in a few seconds.
Yeah, thank you so much. I love Phygital's takes, and brother, if you are not on any stimulants, please give me some of your mojo. Like I'm a big fan. But
coffee, my dude, just dark ass coffee.
Just coffee. Okay, gotcha. So if DAOs are inherently driven by purpose, I would say that most DAOs today don't really have a real purpose, because at this point there's no purpose in Web3 apart from like a very loose, gloomy ideal of sovereignty. I'm not an English speaker, but sovereignty. And yeah, the only way I think a real democratic decision can be made is by making the entry to the DAO and the whole Web3 ecosystem easier. But I also think that eventually, to have the most competent individuals make the decisions, we have to vote them into power, right? So at this point, we are kind of back to the standard recipe our world works on. We vote for people. They eventually get corrupted by lobbyists or might not, and maybe do the right thing, who knows? But how are DAOs at this point different, and hopefully maybe even better than what we have? Like one person, one vote, like you said, or one wallet, one vote. Is that the solution? Government tokens are out of the place at this point, hopefully, but still we are somehow back at what we had and what we have for the last 200 years or more. And like, what am I missing here? What's the idea? Like, what are we striving for?
Here's the good news. We're just starting, right? How long has it taken for us to get this level of self-sovereignty in terms of just our money, right? Just our money, crypto. It's taken 12 years, 15 years, right? The white paper released, Bitcoin launched 2008, so 15 years. Most of the people involved in crypto are interested in money. That's why most DAOs you've seen are literally just about allocation of money. The problem, one of the core problems. What up, Mike? Nice to you join. One of the core problems is we as humans are pretty short-sighted. So the more layers you put in between me and my money, the less likely I'm going to be incentivized for the outcome. That's a problem with ApeCoin DAO, right? Or any DAO, is that people get disaffected very easily because they struggle to see the direct impact or connection between their efforts and money, right? And let's also step back and talk about what money is. Money is simply a custodian of the unequal exchange of time or energy at any given time, right? I don't want your services right now, or you don't want my services right now, but I want yours, so I'll give you an IOU. Or your good or service doesn't equal the desire or the amount of good or service now, goods or services now, so here's an IOU for the difference in terms of amount or time, right? The longer we stretch that apart, the less incentivized people are to do anything with the only thing they have value of, which is their time. So DAOs won't work until they're properly incentivized as well. And proper incentivization requires efficient incentivization. So a DAO council member shouldn't just get $23,000 because that's what people agreed to. That should be flexible. And until we build systems, and to answer your question, it's going to take years, but we're working on it, right? And conversations like this help drive that conversation forward. But it's tying money, unfortunately, to responsibilities at every corner and turn.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Like, I love your vision. I'm just like, it's hard for me to sit out the way until it's kind of like happening, right? It's just rough, but yeah, I'm still trying to believe in the vision, and I get it. It's just the road is very bumpy.
One of the things I've seen DAOs pretty effectively do, and I would look at something like there's an algorithmic stable coin, or it was algorithmic at one point, called Frax Finance. And Frax Finance was actively soliciting for DAO proposals, and they were voting on them at the Frax governance layer on things related to creating new tools, dashboards, analytics, statistics. They would vote on certain types of changes they were making to the algorithmic composition of the stablecoin itself. And then later, when they even made the choice to stop being an algorithmic stablecoin and move towards being a fully backed one-to-one stablecoin. So I definitely have seen DAOs have real utility, and especially if they're operating off of a treasury which was accumulated as a result of direct activities within a very particular space. So I think that has been something that has been somewhat effective, and I would look at least this one as the poster child for something that's kind of working, but it still has a little bit fallen prey to some of the stuff that I talked about, where there are certain people who have such an outsized amount of tokens that they're the only decision makers that matter. Because even if everybody else in the community voted a certain way, if this other big holder didn't vote with it, or they could just come in and veto the entire vote. So it didn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter because effectively there is one decision maker.
Grant, sorry to interrupt. So it should be the opposite, right? DAOs should be built to stop the powerful from, right? Because the idea is that we all have a brain, right? Do you know what I think is going to be the first and biggest and most effective DAO? And I say this because Ed came in, and I was trying to talk about it in his space yesterday, but he wouldn't let me. I think Twitter is going to be the first most successful DAO.
Okay, you got to back that up because that's a pretty big statement over there.
That's a big statement. That's the first time I've ever kind of thought about that idea. So, okay, say more.
Okay, let me run you through it real quick. Okay, as much as Elon loves being blamed for things, which I'm sure he doesn't, or he probably gets a kick out of it. He's the biggest troll on the face of the planet, and I've met him a couple times. My goal would be to be friends with him. My ex-business partners own the hangar in Hawthorne that he flies his G5 into, because he can't land it on commercial on regular runways. It has to land in commercial runways. What better way, right? So he released the Twitter files, and this whole thing is about who is censoring, right? Much like the reason why DAOs are essentially kind of legal, because it's like that meme of the Spider-Man pointing at everybody else, right? If he creates community notes, right, which is essentially starting with a select few of people. He's doing this with compensating influencers as well, right? You have to seed it with the idea. That's how you create a DAO in the beginning. This is what I hope the DAO does. Here's how I think it'll work. But I understand that I've planted the seed, and I'm trusting that you trust everybody to your left and right to water that plant and grow it into the best outcome. Community notes. Start with a select amount of people that you can control. Much like any science experiment, you have a test. You have a test group, right? And then you expand it a little bit. And then you expand a little bit more. And then you say to the group, Now you expand it. Now you expand it further. Now go ahead. Elon doesn't want to be the one deciding who censors and who doesn't. He doesn't want any of his employees deciding who censors or who doesn't, or what crosses lines, or what. Just think about the idea of morality and ethics. Who decides what is moral and ethic? We've given that job to God, right? But all God said in reverse was, "Do unto others that with which you want done unto you." He literally looked back at us and said, "Make your own DAO. Just don't do to the person to your left what you don't want him to do to you." So what better way for Elon to run a company, and for companies to become DAOs, and for NFT projects to be DAOs, than to say, "I didn't do it. You did it. I didn't decide to censor that. Community notes, or the community ledger, or the community team. You decided that. Oh, you want to monetize? Well, like I propositioned Ed yesterday, I think Elon should start just like a community notes, a community monetization team. He can pick the first 10, 20, 30 people, and they decide who should get monetized and how, right? Have fun, baby. I love you. Okay, bye. What's the best way for people to get monetized? Who's the best to decide that decision? Elon or us? We're the ones putting in the time. So I do think that all of these pieces will eventually best be governed. If this is a true town hall and we want true insulation from Section 23, whatever it is, 2300, that allows for publisher immunity, what better way than for it to be a fully self-governed platform? Was that good?
Right.
Yeah, it was amazing. Like, how long would we like let's say community monetizations next to community nodes, like how long would we vote those representatives into like quote unquote office for community monetizations? Like, how long would they have the power to decide?
We decide. Well, the hope is, I wrote a long tweet about this yesterday. I was in a space with the Krasenstein brothers. If you don't know, they were one of the 15 or 20 people or whatever that were decided to get monetized by Elon, and they made, I think, $25,000 each for the first month. That was a gentleman, Ed, who was in here a second ago. And we were on a space yesterday, because I speak with them a lot in spaces, and I suggested this idea. And then I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to write a tweet. But I don't know how to write tweets. So I ran it through ChatGPT. And and then I posted the tweet, and Mario, for those who don't know, Mario Nafal, hate him or love him, he's really good at tweets. He texted me, because I messaged him and I said, "Yo, retweet my tweet." And he responded, he goes, "I don't retweet anybody's tweet." And then he called me, he's like, "That's the worst fucking tweet I've ever read. Even if I was going to retweet a tweet, I wouldn't retweet that. So delete it." So I deleted it. John, stop pumping my leg. So I deleted it, and I'm rewriting it. I've had some friends. I actually asked Ed to rewrite my tweet, but my tweet proposes this idea. My tweet says, "Elon, we love you." And I'll give you clip notes. It says, "Elon, we love you. You're not qualified to decide how we monetize. You can barely run a space. You're great at tweeting. You're a fantastic troll. Leave the monetizing of spaces up to those who know how spaces work." And I said, hosts, co-hosts, panelists, speakers, and listeners, please propose your ideas for best ways to monetize spaces for everybody, for spaces, co-hosts, panelists, speakers, and listeners, right? You guys are spending time. Unless you think for some reason what's coming out of my stupid pie hole right now is worth anything, you're wasting your time. Every second that's going by, you are wasting the only thing that matters in this life. The only thing that has any value, you are wasting. You should probably leave this space right now and go do something. But if you're still here, you think that this has value, right? So I'm trying to create this monetization forum to take it off Elon's hands.
So a couple of interesting points here. First of all, when you talk about people deciding censorship in a sort of crowdsourced way, aren't you afraid of majority rule? Yeah, that's completely counterfactual. Like for every major conspiracy theory, or for every major conflict, there's lots of groups of people who just will win by brute force without actually being, factually right. And then on the monetization side, that's actually very interesting, and I see huge value in what you said. And there have been people who know how to monetize, come from the community and monetize it for all the parties, all of the stakeholders, so to speak, right? But in that system, do you think there should be, and what kind of system should it be, to have negative incentives as well as positive ones, or should it be just positive ones? And by that I mean,
You know what I love? You know
yeah,
what I love? By giving you an example of how a company could turn into a DAO, you are literally asking me the core questions of how does a DAO govern.
good.
You tell me what happens when Machi Big Brother comes in and throws all his weight around, i.e., what happens once Elon, who is also a user, comes in and says, I want to change the age of consent to 14.
Yeah.
I don't know. You tell me.
Well, mutiny probably, but what if it just, does a lot of damage in the process, whether it's, about medical thing, or something else that could have real world implications. Not that, DAOs are not necessarily real world, but you know what I mean, like physical world.
Dex,
Meaning,
I'll give you a perfect example. Do you know what the restrictions or requirements are to release a new medical device are by the FDA?
from what I know, they're pretty stringent, right?
They are, except if you can prove or at least claim that your device is. Jama, stop it. My dog is enjoying this DAO conversation. He's obsessed with my leg. Unless you can prove to the FDA that the medical device you are submitting is sufficiently similar to an already approved device. Does that
And
sound like a
corrupted, right?
what?
And that's where it gets corrupted, where it
Correct.
takes somebody else
Correct.
enough, like patent being broad enough, etc. Yeah.
Correct. And what happens is you end up with people with metal bars stuck in their legs during surgery because medical devices get passed all the time. But if we had control over those decisions, we'd probably have a higher likelihood of having more efficacy in the decision making. So yes, there will be mutiny, and the good thing about DAOs is all the DAOs suck right now, and hopefully we're learning from them. And they've sucked for a while.
But let's say there's a big majority about something that's obviously counterfactual, like, there was no Holocaust, right? Let's say 3 billion people who want to deny Holocaust will speak, like it never happened. And
What
the
Holocaust?
mutiny of those that are in the minority will do about it. Like, let's say they leave, but still there's a majority that's there that's just going to determine it. Is it just going to be like different majorities of different opinions clashing against each other? Or is there going to be any protections? Is it going to be mechanisms? What's the, anarchy is fun until, you deal with the consequences. So what are the kind of breakers involved? What are the protections? Well, you know what I mean?
Perfect. So that's how DAOs can work, right? That's why I said, in my belief or our belief, after the first layer, which is one vote, one token, one vote, or one person, one vote, and you can implement things like quadratic equations. I think it's called actuary. I forget what it's called, but basically it allows you to bet on the likelihood of the outcome of a vote, and you get rated based on your success rates. So any tools that you can implement that grade essentially your qualifications, and there's many ways to look at that, right? Predictions, uh, uh, majority results, minority results, supermajority results, whatever those things that qualify and create color around you as ideally an anonymous individual. So you don't bring into your position your history, positive or negative, and you create authentic color. Those are the things that will then help govern who gets to decide the things. And hopefully that leads to the best outcomes, even if the best outcomes are bad outcomes. That's what the community wants.
this actually is the DeXe way. So it's great to hear you say that. But it was fun to poke at you and just make sure that people don't get the impression that we're talking about the total free for all, where just simple majority wins or anything goes. I like whether it's various coefficients um, and different voting weights, or an additional layer of security, or both, right? As long as there's some system that combines democracy with actual meritocracy.
But
Wait,
that's infinite, right? That should be a never-ending
yeah,
system.
like every system, it should be iterating forever, always getting better, or always fine tuning in one way or another. Because even if it's not necessarily getting better in some measurable way, the world changes, the questions facing us change, the organizational structure changes, the goals and mission setup could change as well, right? So of course, like evolution is not being canceled yet. I see Florian raised his hand, so I'll shut up now and let him speak.
Yeah, I love that, but I'm not really sure if I understand the concept correctly, Phygital. But basically, you said we need kind of like representatives in DAOs, which might even be Twitter. Like Twitter might even be a DAO, not voted in for a fixed amount of time, but be subject to be downvoted to not representing at any time, and to make room for new thinkers, using the power of individuals' votes to be able to vote for their conviction in real time. Plus, like you said, the grade of their qualifications come into play, and also their voting weights come into place to avoid like trolling, mass voting campaigns, and so on and so on. But isn't that also creating like another elite of kind of like policymakers like we had before?
Yeah, just hopefully the right elite. There's nothing wrong with elite people. There are elite people. Nothing personal. Most people on Twitter or in the space can't have these kinds of DAO conversations, which is why one of the biggest problems with DAOs is they don't get a lot of attention because people assume they don't work. But more realistically, it's just not exciting, right? Because there's not a direct result of money. And most of these spaces that you go to, somebody messaged me and said, finally a good space. So thank you. And thank DeXe, not me. But yeah,
Thank
people.
you. And they message you. Hopefully, they're messaging us.
The reality is that there are people are smarter than other people. People are more experienced than other people. That doesn't make them better people. That just makes them better for the job. Now, if those positions are filled by people who you infer the words elite, i.e., they just have a lot of money, Donald Trump, um, you're right. That doesn't make them the most qualified. I didn't get one laugh for the Trump joke. Good. That does not make them the most qualified for a position. A fucking just because you're on TV being scripted and edited to go, you're fired, doth not make you a CEO and doth not make you, probably a good president, um, unless you're still scripted and reading off of a prompter. Anyhow, then I'm not
I
going
have
to
a
get into
story
it.
about that that I should not share publicly.
Oh, share right now.
No, it's about President Bush Jr. I saw him before he went on stage, and he was totally serious and actually looked like a legitimate, smart politician, until his name was announced. The stupid smile came on, and the rest, right before the first election where he became president.
He's actually a smart guy, though. He's like a reverse Trump. He actually has a brain.
Yeah, totally. I mean, Trump, there's no redemption whatsoever, and I will go publicly with that. I see no redeeming qualities about him at all.
It's okay. I'm like the token.
That's personal opinion, not affiliated with DeXe or any other participants of this podcast.
So I'll say it for fuck Trump and whoever's in here. That doesn't mean I don't like his political aims. That means I don't like him as a human or a meat suit. But we digress. Florian, to answer your question, is without sounding Machiavellian, humans need structure. Order needs structure. So you're not going to avoid that. What you're seeing now is no structure and the fact that chaos does not work. That is correct. And what you're seeing is elitism at the ground floor. You're seeing those with enough money making decisions that they're not qualified for. That's why the tiered structure that I mentioned, 10,000 to 5,000 to 200, 2,500 to 1,000 to whatever it is, all the way till you get to your C-suite, but with fungibility throughout and push and pull in terms of flexibility to make decisions without needing to go to the DAO for every penny spent. Now we're getting closer to an effective DAO, right? So you vote in the first round of people. Those are, let's say, NFTs that hold positions, and let's say they're ERC 6551s that store people in them as represented as NFTs, or they're 3525s that store tokens inside of an NFT that represent the efficacy or the correctness in terms of how much you contributed, how frequently you contributed, how often you were right, things like that, right? What that does is you might have elitism in terms of money in the first level, but then once you get to the second level, all you're doing at the first level is not making decisions about proposals necessarily. You're just deciding who is the best qualified to make decisions about proposal. And they vote in who they believe are the best qualified to make decisions. Legal, financial, whatever the case may be, so on and so forth. And then you can create a structure that actually ebbs and flows like an organism, naturally to the whims of the crowd, but also to the goals of the project of the company.
I think that is what I was kind of alluding to when I said like the Republican form of government or whatever, or the delegated form of government, where you say, I want my tokens or my votes handled by this representative, and then this representative has a certain amount of voting power, and they're voting for the executives or the officers or whoever that are going to then be in control of that entity. The one thing that I think DAOs would still have to bridge to fully allow this kind of a thing to occur is a really strong custody mechanism. And we get to talk about Chia for a second again, which is always fun, because they've thought about this a little bit with respect to how do you have like some big amount of money and then have that big amount of money or that treasury effectively governed by some number of people who would potentially be fallible. They could lose their key or do something wrong or whatever, and then you're really sunk if you haven't really thought about how to custody those funds. So I think as we start to see DAOs have a really effective custody mechanism for managing treasury, then that DAO has some teeth, because now that DAO has some mechanism of controlling money in a way that is directly tied to the blockchain. I think until you have something that ties those things a little stronger together, you're at the whims of, okay, now here are the people that were supposed to do stuff and they have to do the right thing. And if not, there's no real way for the DAO to, enforce anything. They're out there trying to take legal action or whatever to enforce their will, versus if you have strong custody and the coins are controlled inside the blockchain, then you have a little bit more directness with respect to like removing somebody from office.
Agreed. And before we go to Florian, just think about this like very simple version of that, right? And I'll use Ben.eth and every other NFT project as opposites of the same example. And I know that's kind of weird, but let's use Ben.eth for an example, right? You familiar with the Ben.eth situation?
I'm not. Can you kind of recap on?
Oh no, it's way too much to recap. But I'll, like way too much to recap. But I'll sum it up and say, Jama, stop it. I'll say he asked a bunch of people to send him money for a token, and they sent it to his personal wallet. And then he launched tokens. Token didn't do so well. But
that's a change. I thought there was something new happening. Okay.
No. Yeah, loyal and silent.
That's right? Last week. That's last.
Yes. The interesting part is you saw this phenomenon happen, which is a bunch of people who bought the token, i.e., they didn't buy the token. They sent him money, right? And now they see their money sitting in his wallet. They see it, right? Then they got tokens. Now they go, wait a second, my tokens are worth less than my money. Hey, put that money into the LP. I see it. Give it back, right? Which is like, okay, well, then I don't think you understand how tokenomics work. If you think you're going to put money into a project and then just get the money back, where does the money come from for token go up? Oh, you need other people to put money in so you can take their money. Oh, you missed that part, right? On the inverse side of that is where most NFT projects go. Like, look at Azuki, right? They gave him $38 million, and they took that $38 million and they sent it to Coinbase. And then they go, wait a second, why isn't the value of my token going up? Wait, what are you doing with my money? To Grant's point, why doesn't every NFT project, why don't NFT holders, because we're greedy, you guys are greedy little fuckers, why don't they require the founders to dox the wallet and put all the money on chain? Like, we gave you money, you promised to do something with it, show us you're doing it. Like, how is that not basic common sense? So Grant is saying is, the more we put projects on chain, like, does that sound like a crazy request? Hey, we gave you a bunch of money. We know that these cartoons aren't art. You gave me a roadmap promising stuff. We presume that you had enough foresight to do a little bit of number crunching to say, okay, I'm promising to build a metaverse with flying space aliens and electric dildos. That's probably going to cost $12 million to build. But wait, you only raised $1.5 million, and we're surprised that you didn't build the dildos and the metaverse, right? Just common sense, I think, goes a long way. And when it comes to what Grant was talking about in terms of voting, tie everything to money, because that's all we fucking respond to, especially in this space. Sorry, I ranted. Florian, what else?
I'm still surprised that, I mean, I haven't seen it, but it's probably out there, but I'm surprised that it's not a common practice to have this kind of funding be done in stages, be a smart contract to just not release all the funds to, Bandit ETH or others. And, basically based on delivery of saying, hey, you deliver this thing you promised at the value you promised, then we'll get you more of the funds. You need this much money to mint, great. Or this much money to develop it, whatever, great. The rest you will get later. And maybe even, tie up some, I don't know, collateral or whatever it is, right? People are just giving money and not thinking twice about it. But
don't talk crazy, Dex. You mean fiscal responsibility? That's never going to happen in this space.
Fiscal responsibility.
Poly's launching a coin. Poly's launching a coin. Aren't you excited?
Yeah. Fiscal responsibility is a boomer term, so we can't really use that. I think that's against the rules of DeFi. But yeah, something like that would be nice, right? But you guys were talking about representative Republican government, which is very interesting. It's a question I wanted to ask earlier, so I'll circle back to it now. Just, you and I are both U.S. citizens, I'm assuming, Grant maybe as well. Can this be applied to governments? Can this be applied to U.S. government, for example, where I had this vision for a while of just...
Could you imagine government on chain?
Not even.
Could you imagine contributions on chain, lobbying on chain?
Yeah, I would love to see that, but just not only being on chain, but the whole idea of people electing representatives who know what they're doing in a very specific thing, right? Not just someone who's good at talking about stuff they can do, not just somebody who came from the Kennedy clan or whatever, potato farmer, etc.
I'll come and talk about free DAO once we launch it, but that's what we're doing.
Yeah, but so maybe exactly what you guys are doing, but actually electing people on the local and state level, and obviously national, specifically for for agriculture, for education, for whatever, security, transportation, treasury, whatever they're called, ombudsman. Because right now it feels so random at times, right? Or most of the time, it's like, why is this guy qualified? Because he raised the most money.
Wait! You mean Herschel Walker wouldn't have been a great congressman? He was really good at football.
Well, I mean, so was Ford, right? But
Sorry, I'm a cynical fuck. Florian, what up?
I just want to ask. I love the way that Grant was focusing on custody in his take earlier, which is, in my opinion, somewhat equivalent to kind of like transparency, which eventually is one of the biggest benefits that I see we have with Web3 and blockchain, because it's a public ledger, and lobbyists and politics and like people who are really good at talking savvy players, they will have a harder time to hide shady things. And for me,
So,
this is like one of the biggest,
Florian,
yeah, yeah.
let me blow your mind the way my mind was blown once. What is an NFT?
Well, for me, it's like a certificate of like a one-time existing kind of like thing in the world that nobody can replicate or copy.
What is blockchain?
It's a public ledger where people can just like, it's going to be like, instead of like verified by different.
I'll cut it short. It's immutable data. Period.
Okay,
That's all this is data, right?
it's all data.
It's just it's immutable data. So once we strip back the pictures, once we strip back the dollar signs, right? I described money earlier. It's just data. And those who are going to make the most success when you're organizing humans, you're organizing data. And the best way to organize data is, what is tokenomics? Tokenomics is simply incentives, right? We think of it as money, tokens, because we respond to money. But all of these things, even in a DAO, you are trying to create structures and incentivization models that accomplish the goals that you set out to accomplish. So the more that you tie trust, transparency, immutability, data, and money, the highest likelihood you're going to have to accomplish the outcomes that you want. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, yeah, I agree, and that's what I'm saying. Like, the transparency we have on the blockchain is like the only benefit that I see right now with Web3 and blockchain. And I love the idea that you said earlier that people actually leading that understand the subject at hand to its core with a chance of being downvoted at any time in real time. I love that vision for DAOs, and I don't know if that's your vision for DAOs, like, but I love that, and I think I can stand behind it because I don't want anarchy, because anarchy doesn't work, you know, like we've seen that before, like
By
all
the way,
these systems
Florian,
that,
by
yeah.
the way, Florian, anarchy works when you want to hide the truth. Why do you think Pauly is doing what he's doing? Why do you think Ben does what he does? You create. Why do you think he said the N word in spaces? You get people hyped up, right? Emotion is the gap between fact and knowledge. Religion is the gap between science and knowledge. Thank you, Neil deGrasse Tyson. How when there's hype, right? FOMO, right? That's literally irrationality. Well, when you're selling something that's irrational, right? How is Pauly's token going to succeed? Period, right? How? He's going to need to continue to shroud any token, shroud rationality with irrationality.
Well, I like me personally, I don't want anarchy because I think it doesn't work. I want a thriving society that is for all the people, and Web3 and tokens allow us to make more nuanced decisions, like you outlined before. And yeah, like you said before, I think it's going to take a long time to get there, but yeah, I think you have the right ideas.
Thanks, man. The reality is, I'll only work once we get gambling out of this fucking space. So unfortunately, we need people to lose more and more money and hate NFTs and hate crypto more and more and more until they start looking at the undercurrent of the technology, which is all that's important here. Sorry, Dex, for taking over your space. Go ahead.
No, it's fun. It's first of all, it's fun, and we actually like at least have an hour over, but having fun. So, as long as you have time, I'm happy to keep talking. Reasonably long, but because my girlfriend's coming back too, and she's sending me messages. So let's talk about the cycle because that's interesting, right? Right now we're not exactly sure. I mean, some say we're in the bear market, some say we're in the bull market. I'm cynic like you, so for me this is still bear market or possible pre-bear market. Maybe it's bull market, maybe the halving started early, whatever. But the kind of conventional thinking is that builders build in bear market, and then madness ensues in the bull market with all the FOMO and hype, etc. And then bear market comes, builders keep building it. Do you see the bull bear cycle as kind of conductive to building up the industry, or do we need to hype a little less and focus more on building and kind of even it out a little bit?
So here's the beauty. First of all, I think that we're going to have an acceleration of the happening, and I think it's already happening, right? By the rumor, sell the news. The fact is the reality of spot ETFs and institutional money coming in was a bulging wave to begin with, ready for a result like the Ripple result. And no pun intended, we will see a ripple, a cascade of more litigation coming through. If for nothing else, from a legal perspective, XRP, which will be appealed while the government still tries to get regulation on the board. It's been a balance. It's been a push and pull between regulation and legislation and litigation, essentially. It's no coincidence that Ripple occurred while MiCA occurred in the EU, while Bitcoin occurred, while BlackRock occurred, Valkyrie, I think what happened today? BitGo or something like that had an ETF that's on the books now too. I believe there's going to be a speeding up of the happening, and I believe that we are at the bull right about now. The beautiful thing is that builders build throughout. The only difference is what institutional money puts their money into and what the attention economy is focused on. But building has been occurring the entire time. So that's my thoughts there.
And I mean, do you think this is fine, or doesn't matter, the whole cycles thing? Is it even relevant to talk about, or is it just we need to go through? We need more people out of it, more people to gamble everything and lose it, so they stop looking for the hype. Is that it? Okay, that's that answers it. But...
Yes, what you have seen through all the cycles is a systematic higher lows and lower highs. And that just means ranges. So we're going to see smaller and smaller ranges. That doesn't mean that we don't see consistent uptick. None of this is financial advice. None of this is legal advice. This is just
none of us are any tokens, NFTs, or securities here. SEC, please leave us alone. We're just talking about stuff
I think Polly goes first, but yeah, go ahead, Florian.
Sorry. What about DAOs? Do you see institutions, governments, whatever, feeling threatened by your kind of perfect concept of DAOs? And
if Olympus DAO that at one point had $6 billion under management, I repeat, Olympus DAO had $6 billion under management, and by the way, my friend was in charge of the treasury. Genius, but is that really that's how we're operating?
I'm glad
because it kind of challenges the status quo of everything, right? How politics work, how lobbyists work. It challenges everything.
Correct. As I said, what did you say, DeXe, by the way?
I said I'm glad that you two are still friends. I guess that's a and that he's still alive, right? I mean, both of those things are great.
Thank God for anonymity, right? The reality is that DAOs are, in my opinion, the the holy grail of crypto. When the white paper said, when they wrote the white paper, when the cypherpunks, yes, Grant, I said cypherpunks. You can chill chia again. When they created, and it's a small room, so I can say it. I was with these motherfuckers in Puerto Rico, right? This is being recorded. Delete the shit afterwards. But we were doing mushrooms and fucking chasing manatees and talking about. They were doing other stuff. The most of crypto was built off of Special K, by the way. Get excited. Facts. But Yeah, apparently a K
You
hole is
heard
a
it
great
here
place.
first. Use special K, build crypto.
Don't use special K. This is not human advice, but but it's coincidental that for some reason horse tranquilizers is a good place to forget that you're in Puerto Rico and build shit. But this stuff was built altruistically. Like DeFi, the only good thing about DeFi is hopefully getting more people in. But it's by definition, DeFi is a cycle, right? You over leverage because there's greed, and you will flop. The U.S. government is a cycle. The dollar is a cycle. Everything is a cycle, right? 2008, 2018, 2026. Sorry, these are cycles. So as long as they lead to adoption, right? NFTs were great. Hey, here's a picture. Let's call it art. You know that art can be worth more money, so buy it. Oh, by the way, it's a token. And by the way, you need a wallet. And by the way, now you can stake it and get tokens. Oh, what's a token? Well, here's an exchange. Well, here's how you operate an exchange. Here's how you work on an exchange. Oh, okay. Here's an IDO. Here's an IEO. Here's an ICO. Right? These are all educational cycles that are good for the space. So yeah, we need casualties. That's how war works.
I mean, it's also a sign of a market that stabilized the industry.